Welcome into this holiday edition of the Fighting Saints Report. It's going to be a little bit of the holiday spirit and some power rankings as well as just like last time to let the listeners know, this is pre-recorded before the final weekend of games before the holiday break, so we're not taking those games into account with our power rankings. I don't think a lot would change. If anything, those spots between 12 and 7 would probably change a little bit with a couple games this weekend. But your top spots, your bottom spots are probably going to remain the same. So this is the Fighting Saints Report Holiday Edition. And with that in mind, we're going to start off with a pretty fun project. I think that two of us had a good time with this. Every USHL team has a Christmas song. And Christmas music has been playing since Thanksgiving ended, probably on Thanksgiving when you were eating your second plate of turkey, mashed potatoes, and stuffing. You started throwing on those first Christmas songs. But what this is completely silly, but for us to have some fun with the USHL and the holidays. So what we'll do is we'll do the first 8 teams in alphabetical order in this segment, and then the second 8 teams in the next segment. Each team is a Christmas song with a little bit of an explanation in between, and then the second half of this show will be legitimate power rankings with much more methodical decision-making behind them than this. So without further ado, we'll start off with the very first team. I believe it's Chicago, who will start things off with Chicago. What song?
I've had a lot of practice here since before Halloween, actually.
Yes, I remember that story. It scared me a little bit.
It does. Anytime normally in the car I have the NHL Network on the Sirius XM, but anytime I drive with my daughter or my wife, they insist on putting on those goofy Christmas things, and I can't believe they put them on in October.
Yeah.
So I've had plenty of experience in listening to a lot of these holiday songs, so I believe I'm pretty educated on these.
Well, then educate us.
Starting with Chicago. Chicago, actually, I grouped them up with Green Bay for my Christmas song. It's Christmas in Dixie, which is by Alabama. And it was, I believe, in 1982 it was recorded. For all these people, I know people probably never heard of that song, but Christmas in Dixie, I'm going to go with that because both of those teams are playing in they're playing part of the Winter Classic down in Dallas. So they're going to play a home-and-home series at the Cotton Bowl, outdoors at the Cotton Bowl. It's not necessarily at Christmas time. It's probably closer to New Year's. But I thought that was kind of a cool deal for them to get an opportunity to play an outdoor game I play one outdoor game. I think one is indoors, if I'm not mistaken. But it's kind of a cool deal that a couple of USHL teams get to go down to be a part of an NHL tradition that, for my money, is right there with college football on New Year's Day.
Yep.
So it's going to be pretty exciting for them to have that opportunity. And so Christmas in Dixie for both Chicago and Green Bay.
Well, I'll go with Chicago and then Green Bay as well. Start off with the steal. I've got Carol of the Bells by Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Now, the original Carol of the Bells wouldn't be good for Chicago, but Trans-Siberian Orchestra picks it up with a fast-paced, blood-rushing, tons of energy type version of Carol of the Bells, and that's exactly the style of offense that Chicago plays. It's fast-paced, it comes at you in waves. So I've got Carol of the Bells by Trans-Siberian Orchestra for Chicago. For Green Bay, I have Feliz Navidad, because this is a team that I kind of know what they are, but then I can't quite figure them out. It's a song that's in English and in Spanish, so some people might know what's going on, and they're like, what the heck is going on? That's kind of how I feel about Green Bay right now. I think they're really good sometimes, and then they lose those games in the shootouts, and they don't play really well, and I'm starting to question them. And then it's back to I know exactly what's going on. Feliz Navidad, 2 languages, 1 song. Green Bay kind of feels like 2 teams in the same team right now this year, so I'll go with Feliz Navidad for the Green Bay Gamblers. Why don't we go with Cedar Rapids next?
Cedar Rapids, I'm going to go with Jingle Bells on the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders, and I say that because anytime you go there, all you hear is the cowbells, and when I've gone there, we have cowbells here in Dubuque. In Waterloo, the Cowbell Cup, obviously. But there just seems so much more annoying when you go to Cedar Rapids and they ring the cowbells after the Rough Riders score a goal. So Jingle Bells is where I'm going to go with the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders.
That's a good one. I have another classic for Cedar Rapids, maybe not as classic as Jingle Bells, but I have the Little Drummer Boy, and largely where Carol of the Bells by Trans-Siberian Orchestra describes the way Chicago plays, I think the Little Drummer Boy describes the way Cedar Rapids plays. It's nothing flashy, it's slow, it's methodical, but for them it gets the job done. Much like that song, there's not much going on, but it works. A lot of people like the song. I'm not a huge fan of the song myself, but Cedar Rapids, Little Drummer Boy for me because it describes their style of play pretty well. Moving down the alphabetical list, it looks like Des Moines is next.
Des Moines, I'm going to go with. Des Moines was one that I probably had the toughest time with. And I couldn't really find one that really mattered or that I really fit for me with Des Moines. So I had to go to a classic Christmas song. All I Want for Christmas is My Two Front Teeth. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know that it fits perfectly with Des Moines, but in a segment like this, we're talking about hockey players. We had to find a spot for that song somewhere along the line, and so I'm going to go with All I Want for Christmas is My Two Front Teeth. It has nothing to do with the Buccaneers and their dental work or anything like that, so apologies to the folks down in Des Moines, but it's a hockey segment, and I just had to find a way to work that in somewhere.
There you go. I struggled with Des Moines as well a little bit, but what I went with is there is a song, but the actual maybe spoken story is more well known, so maybe I'm cheating a little bit. It's The Night Before Christmas.
Oh.
The reason I went with The Night Before Christmas for Des Moines is The Night Before Christmas is awesome. There's a lot of anticipation, just not quite as good as the day of Christmas. That's where Des Moines is right now. They're good, they're just not right at the top of the league where they could be. I think they have the talent to be there, but I have Des Moines because it's just not as good as what's coming after it. And much like my power rankings later will reflect, Des Moines is good, just not as good as the teams right after it. So Des Moines is The Night Before Christmas, and now on to Dubuque.
Dubuque. I'm going to go with... this is a song that back in my football days when I was a bench warmer on football, any time that we'd have a game where we'd play really good defensively and we'd shut down the other team on the bus ride back to school, we'd always sing Silent Night. And I think that's just a tribute to the Fighting Saints and the way they play defense. That's really, in my opinion, that's really the hallmark of this team, or really the calling card of this team is the way they play defense, and they've done such a tremendous job. Far and away the best defensive team in the USHL through the first third of the season. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the big key for me, the Silent Night for the Dubuque Fighting Saints.
That's a good one. I like that. For Dubuque, I have Winter Wonderland because it's just a happy song and everything's going right in the song. What can you complain about right now
Exactly.
for Dubuque? It's a Winter Wonderland. They continue to win. They continue to play well. The fans are having a good time. It's something that we didn't mention in the last Fighting Saints report, but that teddy bear toss night at Dubuque, for my money, that might have been the most energetic crowd, not just this season, but one of the most energetic crowds from the season before, the two that I've been here so far. Fans are getting into it. Everything's a winter wonderland right now for Dubuque.
And I thought one of the really cool aspects of that is the players really got into that as well, too. A lot of times it's just a matter of picking up the teddy bears and throwing them in boxes, but the guys were having fun. They were posing for pictures. They were diving into the big stacks of teddy bears, and a lot of smiles on their faces, and that's, to your point, it just seems like the guys are having a lot of fun here.
Yep.
Great chemistry in the locker room, and just a wonderful atmosphere all the way around this team. And I think that's, the fans are seeing that as well too. I mean, the fans are getting pretty excited, as excited as I've seen the fans in a few years.
Yeah, it's awesome. The success breeding a lot of happiness from the fans. Next up, we have Fargo.
Fargo is this one. I'm gonna fudge it a little bit. I'm gonna go White Christmas on Fargo. And actually, you could probably call that White Halloween because they get snow in October. By far the northernmost team in the USHL, and they always have snow. And it seems like anybody who makes a road trip up there in October has to deal with snow or inclement weather. And just when I think of, it's almost like It's darn near the North Pole up there in Fargo. So I'm going to go with White Christmas just because of all the snow they get up there and all the difficulty they have in travel.
Well, we were on the same page for this one because I have let it snow because it won't stop anytime soon in Fargo. I mean, plain and simple, it didn't have much to do with the hockey team and more to do with where they play, but we were on the exact same page. It's not stopped. The snow's not stopping anytime soon in Fargo. So that one's nice and easy. On to Lincoln.
Lincoln, let's see, where do I have Lincoln? Oh, I'm going to go with You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. And at the time that I was looking at this, they were leading the USHL in penalty minutes.
Second now by only a little bit.
Second now by just a little bit behind Madison, but they just had that meanness, that grittiness about them, and it just kind of seemed like it fit really well. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch, and they're tough to play against. Not real, you kind of cringe when you see them, and that really speaks to Lincoln's physical style and the way they like to just grind it out.
I thought it would be tough for us to guess the same song for the same team when we were doing this, and we haven't done it yet, and we haven't done it after this one, but twice in a row now we're on the same page. Lincoln, because of the penalties, I did Nuttin' for Christmas by Barry Gordon, and it's all about him doing bad stuff to get coal in his stocking for Christmas. I'm getting nothing for Christmas, Mommy and Daddy are mad. That's how the chorus starts. So Barry Gordon is, because Lincoln takes a lot of penalties, they might get coal in their stocking this Christmas. So that's my pick for the Lincoln Stars. And you just mentioned the leader in penalty minutes, but Madison, your pick.
Madison Capitals, I just had to go with Blue Christmas. The Capitals are, they've been such a tough team to play against the last few years and always so gritty, but they're just really struggling this year. Winning percentage under 200 and, really struggling to find wins. And it's just tough for the Madison Capitals. You hate to see it, and, they're the one team that they started making some trades here to kind of shake things up a little bit and, trying to make a little bit of a move, but I think that's a team that's, by Christmas time they're almost out of the playoff hunt, and that's always tough when you're a third of the way through the season and you're pretty much out of it. And it's a tough thing for Madison. I think it's a neat community. I think it's a market that I'd like to see really take off and really gain some traction, but they've struggled this year, and it's going to be a big uphill climb the last 2/3 of the season.
Well, you know what they say when you're out of the playoff hunt already by Christmas. There's a song title that describes that. It's Christmas at Ground Zero by Weird Al Yankovic, and that's unfortunately where Christmas is for the Madison Capitals. They only have 3 wins this year. Again, mathematically, they're still in the playoff hunt, but they're out of it for all intensive purposes, and that early in the season, that's a tough pill to swallow. But yeah, I've got Christmas at Ground Zero for Madison because just about everything has gone the way of the opposition when the Madison Capitals take the ice. Well, that's the first half of our Christmas songs. Hopefully you're still listening to this wackiness, and when we come back, we'll get to the other 8 in the USHL as our Christmas spectacular continues. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Molesky, Jim Leitner. No hockey games this upcoming weekend, so we're talking Christmas songs and what USHL teams would be if they were Christmas songs. You just heard the first half of that. We'll kick things right off with Muskegon for the start of the second segment.
Muskegon, I'm going to start out with the song Last Christmas. And the reason I say that is this time, last Christmas, Muskegon was clearly, running away with the Eastern Conference. They were far and away ahead of everybody else in the Eastern Conference, and they were a team that ended up winning the Eastern Conference because they had so much talent and so much depth. And right now they're kind of scuffling towards the bottom, right around that 500 mark, and so I'm sure that they wish it was last Christmas.
Muskegon, I have my grown-up Christmas list by Kelly Clarkson because this is the youngest team in the league. And so right now they just need a little bit more experience. So their list is literally maybe growing up a little bit or some more grown-ups on the team. But Muskegon has a boatload of talent on that team. They just don't have much USHL experience, and they're by far the youngest team in the league. They only carry 2 1999 birth years, and they both happen to be netminders. So this is a team that next Christmas, it might not be last Christmas because they might be back where they were the year before. But right now it's my grown-up Christmas list because they're just a little inexperienced right now to get any of that consistent play that you need at the USHL level. Looks like we go out west for Omaha.
Omaha, my song for the Omaha Lancers is the 12 Days of Christmas. And the reason why I say that is in the 10 years that the Fighting Saints have been back in the USHL, I don't think any team has changed uniforms more than the Omaha Lancers. And I was trying to recollect how many different jerseys they've had in that time span. And I know it's at least 12. It's at least 12 different jerseys where, you look at Dubuque, it had the same exact style for the first 9 years, same exact home and away jerseys for the first 9 years. This year it's a little different with the 10th anniversary season jerseys, and I assume they're going to go back to the traditional look next year. But with Omaha, it seems like every year they're coming out with a brand new jersey or a new style, and I would think there's only so much you can do with black and orange, but they keep finding a way.
Yeah, the Omaha Lancers, they do switch up their jerseys a lot. You already mentioned this song, or I'm not sure if you mentioned this song yet, but I have All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey, but the live version. Because the live version is still a solid song, it's just not nearly as good as it was 10 years ago. And that's kind of the same way I feel about Omaha. They're still a solid team, but they're not as good as they were 10 years ago when they were, 1, 2, or 3 in the Western Conference, it seemed, every single year. Mariah can still sing the song. She just doesn't have the pipes she did 10 years ago, similar to the Omaha Lancers. Let's see where we go next, I believe. And I'm just as bad at the alphabet as I am at math, but it looks like we go with Sioux City next.
Sioux City, I'm going to go with Do They Know It's Christmas? The Live Aid song from back in my heyday in the 80s. And the reason I say that, I came up with this list. I just been watching some of the highlights, and they kind of had like a big brawl with Des Moines. They had a couple real nasty scrapes, and that's what I came up with. Sioux City. Do they know it's Christmas at all? This is a festive time of the year. You shouldn't be dropping the mitts with anybody, and unfortunately they did. So I'm gonna go with Do They Know It's Christmas?
Similar. I don't know if they do, because my song is Where Are You Christmas by Faith Hill from the live-action Grinch movie. But it's just a slight parody of it. It's Where Are You Offense, because that's right what Sioux City can't really find right now. Their highest goal total since 2014-15 is 179 goals of offense. This year they're bottom 5 in the league once again. And just to put it in perspective, 179 goals scored over a season, that's the lowest total that Dubuque has had in the last 5 years. It's Sioux City's highest. So by and large, this is a team that hasn't scored much in recent history, so they're looking to find the offense like Faith Hill was looking to find Christmas.
Well, you mentioned Weird Al Yankovic earlier in the segment, so I think you can have a little poetic license to
I don't know if anything about this segment isn't poetic license. Next up, Sioux Falls.
Sioux Falls is, I'm going to go with O Come All Ye Faithful. And the reason why I say that for Sioux Falls is by far they lead the league in attendance every single year. Even this year when they struggled out of the gates, they've always drawn really well. And there are times when they draw 10,000 fans to the Premier Center out there in Sioux Falls, and you have to give a nod to the organization for their ability to draw fans as consistently as they do. It's a great sports town. It's a great sports area in South Dakota, and they always, even their baseball team in the summertime, draws really, really well. So I just thought that was so fitting. Oh, come all ye faithful for Sioux Falls.
That's a good one. For Sioux Falls, I have one of my favorite Christmas songs, Believe, by Josh Groban, and he says at the end of the course, you have everything you need if you just believe. Sioux Falls is 5-4-1 in their last 10 after a very, very poor start. It's not a bad roster. They have some talent on there. They just have to get that belief, which came in the form of a couple of wins, and now they're starting to creep up in the Western Conference. So Sioux Falls, just a little bit more belief, and they'll be on their way here in the second half of the season. Now Team USA.
Team USA, I'm going to go with a little similar to what you had earlier, and my song is "What Child Is This?" And again, I picked that with the U17 team in mind because that team has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
The 17s, we've mentioned it pretty much every show that the Team USA is really. Their success is really based on how the 17s do. And if they have a good season, they're going to be up towards the top of the standings. More likely than not, most years, they're down towards the bottom because the U17s really struggle. This year, they've been really good. Mm-hmm. And that's why they've been a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference for most of the season, just because they've had so many spectacular young players. And it'll be interesting to see if they can match the NHL draft success that the U18s had last year in that class. So it's going to be fun to see, but they've been really dynamic, mm-hmm. and so that's why spectacular. And what child is this? I've
got the Christmas song for Team USA. Plain and simple, tried and true. It's a classic. No one really dislikes it. That's kind of how I feel about Team USA there. They always produce a solid team. The Christmas song has stood the test of time. They continue to produce good players, and they represent their country in a lot of these international tournaments. And you always end up rooting for Team USA if you're part of the United States for the most part. So it's a classic. No one can really dislike it, even if you're not the biggest fan of it. You don't hate it. Team USA is the Christmas song for me. Tri-City, all the way out in Kearney, Nebraska.
We have our first repeat song on the list. And I'm going to go with All I Want for Christmas Is You, because you look at the guys that they lost last year, Isaiah Seville in net, outstanding defense core. Their names escape me right now.
Ronnie Attard and Zach Jones.
Jones, those two guys. So All I Want for Christmas Is You. If they have those 3 guys back, they're, instead of being towards the bottom of the Western Conference, they're right there towards the top. And those are really transcendent talents, guys that don't come around very often. And they had 3 outstanding guys like that really carried them last year. And so that's why I'm going with All I Want for Christmas for You Is You. If they have those 3 guys, they're right where they were last year.
We've got another repeat song, Tri-City. I have 12 Days of Christmas. And the reason I have 12 Days of Christmas is because I'm not a fan of the 12 Days of Christmas song. And the reason I'm not a fan of the 12 Days of Christmas song is because it seems like it goes on forever. Such is the case with a trip to Kearney, Nebraska, and such is the case in playing a game against Tri-City, because it takes a lot to get through a game against Tri-City. It's slowed down. They play a good defensive style of hockey. It's really tough to get through the entire song of 12 Days of Christmas. So much like the trip to Kearney, the way that Tri-City plays, just really tough for me to get through it. So 12 Days of Christmas for Tri-City. Only 2 more on the list, Waterloo and Youngstown. Which one do you want to go with?
I'm going to go with Youngstown. Well, alphabetically, yeah, Youngstown's first.
Youngstown, right? I felt like I'd give you a choice at the end, but we can go Youngstown, yeah.
Youngstown is, I'm going to go with No Place Like Home for the holidays, because way out in Youngstown, Ohio, they have, I'm sure, the largest travel budget in the USHL. You look at Kearney, Nebraska, and Fargo. Obviously, those two teams are way out there on the outskirts of the league's footprint, but they at least have some teams that are close to travel to. Youngstown, their closest is at least 3.5 hours away. So they're always on a bus. They're always traveling. They're always away from home. So that's why I went with No Place Like Home for the holidays, just because I'm sure they welcome an opportunity to just sit at home and not worry about being on the road.
Yeah, I have for Youngstown. I have Marshmallow World because their defense is really soft. They've got a good offense, but they've got a soft defense comparable to a marshmallow. Yeah, Youngstown is, if they could figure out their defense, they were better defensively last year, but still they give up a lot of goals. If they could figure out that defense, they'd be a really strong team because the offense can keep up with just about anyone in the league, but that marshmallow defense needs a little bit of a remedy.
The last one is Waterloo. Then that leaves us with the last one, and we can thankfully move on to another segment. But I talked about with Cedar Rapids in the first segment. I saw them as Jingle Bells because of the cowbell connection. Mm-hmm. Waterloo, I'm going to go with Jingle Bell Rock because there's still that element of the cowbells in the Cowbell Cup rivalry, but it just seems like it's so much louder over there. In Young Arena. I don't know if it's the low roof or what it is, or the fans over there are a little crazy, but it just seems like if Cedar Rapids is Jingle Bells, then Waterloo is Jingle Bell Rock for how much louder it is in there. And for my 2 cents, I think it's more annoying with how loud it is and how crazy it is in there. So I'm going to go with that.
It gets loud in there. They have that flat roof. It's not a huge building. It really holds sound well. It's a tough place to play, not just because of the large ice, but also those fans go crazy. Waterloo, I have White Christmas. It might be the classic Christmas song, I think nominated for more awards than any other Christmas song, one of the longest played Christmas songs on radio. It's just been around forever, and it's a classic. There's really not a team that has more history than Waterloo in this league, much like White Christmas as the song itself. So because of the history, because of all that song is outside of just the song, I think Waterloo is similar in the way they are held at esteem in this league. They have probably the longest history and maybe the most rich history. They've produced a bunch of NHL players, just a lot of good things to say about the Waterloo organization. So they'll be White Christmas, and that rounds out our list of Christmas songs. Might not have made sense all the time, but it was a fun exercise.
Well, hopefully Super Hits will be playing their Christmas melodies after this program. So hopefully fans out there can maybe come up with a few of their own, and I'm sure we'll hear about it.
Oh, I'm sure we'll hear about it from plenty of people. Hopefully we do, and if you have any of your own ideas when we post this on our social media, feel free to tweet at us any ideas for the USHL Christmas songs. That's all the time we have for that segment, but when we come back, we're going to get into a more serious segment. We're starting the power rankings. We're going to go 16-1 here in the USHL, and again, not factoring in the final weekend of games before the holiday break, but 16-1 for power rankings after this. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Molesky and Jim Leitner. Away from Christmas songs, just to hockey, the power rankings in the USHL. The second time we've done this during a Fighting Saints Report this season. And we'll start with 16, move our way up to number 1. So we'll do the first 8, then the final 8. But we just talked about this during the break. Unfortunately, you don't have to spend much time on 16, but for both of us, it's got to be Madison.
It's got to be Madison. And, it's unfortunate. Again, I think this is a program that, I've actually liked this program. It's a team that's been right on the cusp, I think, the last few years. They've always been so difficult to play against defensively, and, for whatever reason, they've just kind of lost their way this year. And, at the time we're taping, they're 3-19-1 for only 7 points. That's that's tough. And again, I think there are very few teams that play their way out of the playoffs, in the first half of the season, the first third of the season.
Yeah.
And that happened a few years ago with Cedar Rapids, where they had a terrible, terrible start. And it's very similar with Madison this year. And they're starting to make a few moves here and there, trades to kind of shake things up and move some players. So hopefully that makes a little bit of a difference, and they can be more of a player in the after the Christmas break. But it's pretty clear for me that they're 16.
Yeah, for most of the same reasons, Madison's 16 for me. They just haven't been able to figure anything out. The biggest thing for them is they're the worst third period team in the league, and it's not even close. When you find ways to lose those games instead of win those games like we've talked about, it's really a detriment, and that's why they find themselves in last. But we'll move away from the basement, one step above, number 15 on the list.
I think for a long time it was Sioux Falls because record-wise they were there. But I'm going to go actually with down the road from them a little bit in Sioux City. I think Sioux City is a team that's, as we're taping, they're 8-10-3 for 19 points, but they've kind of struggled over the last 10 at 2-5-3 during that stretch. And it's just a team that I thought they'd get a little bit more out of their team this year, and they're struggling a little bit. And granted, we're still only in December, and there's a lot of hockey season left, and that Western Conference is pretty well packed. And you can make a run, you can go on a run. But as of right now, I just think this is a team that's kind of struggling to find its way and is going to need to get over the hump to get there.
I also have Sioux City at 15, and because of what you mentioned and also what I mentioned earlier, the offense just isn't there, and it's the defense is good, but it's not great. It's not good enough to combat one of the worst offenses in the league. So Sioux City's really fallen in my books. When Dubuque played them, they were up towards the top 3 in the Western Conference. Now they're squarely in the 7th spot with Sioux Falls only behind them. But I've got Sioux City in my power rankings falling because next at 14 I have Sioux Falls because of their hot stretch. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. They've started to win games, and I definitely think they possess more offensive firepower, and getting Stauber back in net is huge for them. I think that's actually going to be the biggest difference, is that consistent presence in net. He didn't play when Dubuque faced him, but he was 2-0 at the time. He had played the 2 games earlier in the week and won both of them. So I think Stauber back in the offense, gaining some confidence, helps Sioux Falls. They're at 14 on my list.
Yeah, I have him at 14 as well, and for me, I do have some reservations about putting them at 14. I think they deserve to be higher. This is one that I know is going to be a riser. I think if we're talking about this team a month from now, I think they have a chance to move up to 12 or 10 or in that range, just because the way they've been playing and they've got things figured out. Stauber, I think, is a huge addition to that team. He started at St. Cloud State and really wasn't seeing a lot of playing time, so he decided to go back and take advantage of his junior eligibility. And he's the guy who backstopped them to a Clark Cup last year. And you look at that pedigree as well in that organization. When you have that kind of success, it kind of breeds success. You rarely do you see a team win the Clark Cup and then just completely fall off the face of the map. And I think despite their slow start, I think that's a team that's going to be making a big push in January and February, and I think that's going to be a playoff team.
I did want to put them higher, but again, they're such a slow start. I couldn't, just based on overall record, put them any higher than 14th. Who do you have at number 13?
Number 13, I'm going to go with the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders. That's a team that showed a lot of promise to me in the preseason. I thought they were going to be a much better team. I thought they were a team that really turned the corner last year. They had one of their better years, and they came out of the gates. I thought they were pretty good again coming out of the gates this season. But just recently, they've kind of struggled. Again, they're under 500 in their last 10 at the time that we're taping this, and it's just a team that I thought was going to be better. I really did, and they have 3 players go to the World Junior A Challenge, and so there's some talent there. I think maybe the biggest drop-off that they've had is their goaltending isn't nearly as good as it was last year when they were really outstanding. And so I think this is a team maybe on promise, I think should have been a little bit higher. And again, there's time for them to make up ground and move up in the rankings. But right now, that's where I have Cedar Rapids at 13.
Yeah, the team I have at 13, I don't expect them to stay there, but right now it's Muskegon. They've only won 3 times in their last 10 games. They're certainly missing Daniil Gushchin. Hopefully for them, Oliver McDonald isn't out too long with an injury. They're also missing Rhett Pitlick. But I think that the trade they made with Omaha, once they start to gel a little bit, they'll be a better team. But right now, the recent stretch, they've been so streaky. They were down, then they were up, then they're down again. I think Muskegon, that's that inexperience, the youth on their team showing. I've got Muskegon at number 13, and I'll go right on to number 12. I've got your team that was at 13 at 12 in Cedar Rapids, and you already touched on them a good amount, so I don't have to too much. But yeah, their defense was their calling card last year, and they've really struggled defensively this year. They let in a lot of goals. They got off to that hot start scoring-wise, but I think I said it at some point. I just didn't see it sustainable, and you see they don't have a ton of depth, losing some of their top players to the World Junior A Challenge. But quite honestly, they just don't have really really a ton of pure goal scorers, I feel like, on that team. So once they slowed down a little bit, it makes sense that they've started to creep towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Still should be good enough to be a playoff team, I believe, but yeah, I think they're going to be fighting for a 6th seed towards the end of the season in the East. I've got CR at 12.
And I'm going to go with, we're going to flip-flop here. I'm going to go with Muskegon. And I just, you mentioned they've kind of struggled here of late. But I keep going back to that stretch where they won 7 in a row. And that's pretty impressive to me, and that shows me that that's a team that's going to make a good run towards a playoff spot, and I think certainly deserves to be in a playoff contention. They just kind of lost their way here the last, late November, early December, but I do think that's a team that's going to be a contender. Again, Gushkin, when he gets going, he can be one of the most dynamic players in the USHL offensively, and I think maybe if they get their goaltending figured out a little bit, I think they're going to be a lot better. Giesbrecht, I really liked him. When we saw him a little while ago in Dubuque, I think he could be a difference maker as well. So again, I feel bad putting them down at number 12, but because I do think there's a lot more potential there that they could be a lot higher. But as just by their recent numbers, that's why I have them at 12.
Number 11, who just missed out on your top 10?
Just missed out. This was kind of a tough call for me between Des Moines and Tri-City, but I'm going to go with Tri-City. They're a -10 goal differential at this point, which is kind of disappointing for a team that was so good defensively last year. This is a team that's been so hard for me to figure out because the times that the Fighting Saints have seen them, they've been so good defensively, and you look at them and you say, geez, why are they not a top 3 team in the Western Conference? They just haven't been able to score. 62 goals scored and 72 goals allowed. They just, and right around that 500 mark, actually a little below it. It's kind of disappointing to me that they're not better. But again, this is a team that's coached by Anthony Noreen, who's has a tremendous record of success here, not only in Tri-City but also in Youngstown. So I think he's going to get this ship righted. Maybe they go out and get a couple scorers, and they get a scorer or two. They could flip this around and be a top 3 team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I have Tri-City there as well, just missing out on the top 10. Scoring's the big issue. Colby Ambrosio needs some help. He's the leading scorer on that Tri-City team, but there's not much after that. And also, you mentioned it earlier, but they're missing the stability on the back end, both defensively and in net. They haven't been able to find nearly the success they had last year. I don't think they're going to find that anywhere because it was historic seasons from just about everyone we talked about in Adard, Zach Jones, and Isaiah Seville. Tri-City, I don't see them finishing any higher than 4th in the Western Conference just because of what they have right now on their team, but I think they're overall a better team than where we have them slotted at 11. Top 10, I think you kind of gave yours away a little bit by saying Tri-City or Des Moines. That means we both have Des Moines then at number 10. And like I said, the Bucks are good. They're just not great right now. That defense is really struggling. And they're also a pretty young team. I think they're both, them and Muskegon are some of the youngest in the USHL. So they have to figure things out. But ultimately, I think that defense isn't going to figure itself out enough for them to really make a push much past, 10-7 on my power rankings this season.
Yeah, it's a team that it seems like we're talking about the same thing with a lot of these teams. It's just if they if they can figure things out, they're so much better. Madison obviously is the team that's an outlier, but then you look at these last 4 or 5 teams, they're all in the same boat. I mean, if they figure out one or two little things, they can go from being in the bottom half of the standings to an upper echelon team. So I think that's key. And Des Moines as a team, they've been so explosive at times. And then there have been times when they just didn't look very good at all. So they beat Waterloo. I mean, they handled Waterloo pretty handily, and Waterloo is one of our top teams in the entire league. So I mean, it's just a matter of consistency, I think, in Des Moines, and if they can get those things figured out, I think they're going to be another team that could jump up and make it in the top 4.
Alrighty, almost done here with the first half. Number 9, who do you have?
Number 9, I'm going to go. This is a team that's a little bit higher in the standings. I'm going to go with Youngstown at my number 9. I just, they're above 500. They're at 11-8-4. So points wise, they're a top 8 team. But just that their defense has been so awful, and They're a minus 13 in goal differential at this point in the season, and I just, it's another team. I think if they could just figure out their defensive deficiencies, maybe, I don't know if that's a goaltender, if it's the defenseman in front of them, or what the deal is, but if Youngstown can figure that out, I think they've got a chance to make a run. But a lot of these teams have a lot of things to figure out, so it'll be interesting to see where we're at on at the trade deadline, or if there's any significant player movement over the holidays. But that's why I think I have a Youngstown at number 9, just because defensively their structure needs to be better.
And we're on the same page today. I've got Youngstown at 9 as well, and even though the points suggest that they're a top 5 team in the East, the top half of the team in the league, they're not. The numbers suggest otherwise. Eventually that shows up in the win and loss column. It just might take some time. But yeah, I don't think Youngstown's a really good team this year. Their defense is really, really poor. Their offense is good, but it's not enough to sustain that bad defense. If they figure out the defense, they'll be okay. I don't think they will again. So I've got Youngstown at number 9. And when we come back, we'll get you the top 8. And Dubuque was in our top 3, but it was 3 last time. See if they moved up after another month of success in our power rankings this time around. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report, finishing up this Monday with some power rankings. We're into the top 8, and we'll start with number 8. Jim, who do you have?
I'm going to go with the Omaha Lancers at my number 8. I think it's a team that's played well over the last stretch. 6-1-3 over their last 10. I think that's a team that's starting to figure things out a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think I'm not sure where we had them a month ago, but I think they were a little bit lower than this. But it seems like Omaha is starting to figure things out, and as soon as they do, I think they have an opportunity to be a top 4 team in the West. But I like Omaha at number 8.
This one was a tough one for me. I was battling between 2 teams. I ultimately went with Green Bay at number 8. I like the Green Bay Gamblers a lot. I like their goal differential. I like the depth in scoring. The biggest thing for me right now is they would be higher if they won a couple of those shootout games. And they're still one of the teams that there are a lot of teams right now that have more losses than wins overall, Omaha being another one of them. But I think my affinity for Omaha has them pushed 1 spot ahead of Green Bay. So Green Bay's 8, Omaha is my 7, and I think this Omaha team is much better than they've shown early on. In this last stretch, they have points in 7 straight. They're 4-0-3 in their last 7. As you mentioned, they're 6-1-3 in their last 10. So they're starting to figure things out. I think that trade with Muskegon worked out really well for Omaha as well. A trade that worked out nicely for both teams. They got Luke Mobley, who was in the NAHL previous to this season. They got Nash Nienhuis, who's a third-year veteran in the USHL. That's big come playoff time. They needed help on the back end. He alleviates some of those issues. But Omaha's at 7 because of this recent stretch, but also because it's a future projection in my mind, too, that I still think they're going to be much better than they're showing right now. To me, they're a top 3 finisher in the Western Conference by season end.
I'm going to go with Green Bay as my number 7. It's again, you mentioned the goal differential, plus 15 they were at the time we recorded this. So I mean, that's a pretty remarkable thing. Again, we talked about it earlier. It's a veteran team. A lot of key players back. For my money, I think when you have that many veterans back, I think you need to have a little bit more cushion. I would have liked to see them have a little bit more success this year as opposed to where they're at right now. So, we talked about so many of the other teams having the potential to rise a little bit. I think this is a team that might fall off a little bit because, when all the other teams start catching up and getting more experience, this could be a team that drops a couple spots in my power rankings. So it's going to be key for them and all the veteran leadership that they have to maintain what they're doing right now. And but again, I think this is a team that I think has a potential to drop a little bit.
Mm-hmm. We're almost to our top 5. Who just missed out on the top 5 for you?
I'm going to go with Lincoln. I think just Lincoln was a team that it came out of the gate so hot, and I thought that was a team that and I know there were people out there that kind of thought Lincoln was kind of a mirage, and they weren't nearly as good as what their record showed, and for Waterloo's been running away with the West in Lincoln was right there with them for the better part of the first couple months, and they just, there were people that kind of thought they were a mirage and that they weren't going to have that staying power, and as it turns out, they kind of have been right. And but Fargo again, Lincoln, who's what I'm talking about. Lincoln is a team that they're under 500 in their last 10. And this is a tough stretch between Thanksgiving and Christmas. You want to play good hockey, and they haven't been playing as well as they did at the beginning of the season. So that's why I dropped them down to my number 6.
Yeah, I think we had them both at number 4 in the last power rankings. They drop a little bit. They're 6 as well. That hot start's still keeping them afloat here in the better half of the power rankings, but I don't think they're a flash in the pan, but I don't think they're as dominant as they showed early on. I think they're one of these teams that could surprise you, win a playoff round, but no more than that. I don't necessarily think they're built for much more than outscoring teams, which they were able to do in the first half, but offense usually doesn't sustain itself at a pace like Lincoln had for the entire season. Chicago seems to be bucking that trend, at least as of now, but I've got Lincoln at number 6. I'll kick off my top 5. I really like Fargo right now. I like where they're going. I've got Fargo at number 5. They're one of the hottest teams in the USHL in the past 10. They're, I think, 4 games over hockey 500 because they have 11 wins and 7 regulation losses. But when you look at Fargo, nothing flashy at all, but very good management, very good coaching, and a couple players that have better talent than your average player. Lyndon Breen's a good player. Caden Bolson has one of the harder shots in the entire league. And I think Andre Pavel's a really good second-line center, a good captain for that team. So some good players for Fargo. And look, they beat Dubuque 2 times. They've played them this season, and Dubuque hasn't been easy for anyone. So Fargo's in my top 5 now.
Yeah, Fargo is my number 5 as well. And I just look at, there's a big separation in points-wise between them being at number 5 and Team USA at number 4 in the standings-wise. But Fargo has 5 games in hand on Team USA. So you pick up those. If you win all 5 of those, you get 10 more points, and then you're right in the discussion of being a top 4 team. I think that's kind of what's hindering the Force right now. In terms of winning percentage, they're at 605, which is really good. And but I think that it's kind of a misleading because you look at their points and those things, and it's easy to put them at number 5. But I think this is a team that can be a top 4 team, top 3 team. Mm-hmm. They're certainly the second best team in the Western Conference right now. Yep. So I think it's just a matter of them getting caught up on games played, and I think when that happens, I think you're going to see this team make another big run. But I think it's a pretty clear consensus number 5 there. Mm-hmm.
And number 4, I'm guessing we've been pretty much on the same page. I'm guessing we have the same team, but who do you have for number 4?
Well, I think you got to go Team USA right now. It just they've played a few more games than the other teams ahead of them in the power rankings, but they're a 708 winning percentage. And again, this is a team we've talked about it many times. If the U7 teams are good, they're going to be awfully tough to match this team. And they beat Dubuque in an overtime or shootout?
It was overtime.
It was an overtime
5-4.
game. They beat Dubuque, so I mean they've got some good quality wins. They've the U17s. Again, there have been a few years where the U17s don't win a game until mid-December, late December, and this team is over 500 as a U17 team. You're talking about guys who are 16 years old.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendous collection of talent. They're big and they're strong, and I think when all is said and done a few years from now, this U17 class is going to be better than the U17 or the U18 class that's out there now. So, but it's going to be you live and die by your U17s, and they've been very, very good. And so I think they're a good, solid number 4.
8 straight wins for Team USA. They're also my number 4. 4 wins from the U18s and 4 wins from the U17s in that span. So equal contributions right now. 17-7 overall. They've played the most games in the USHL, but they're legit because of their U17s. Like you said, that's usually the team that you'll measure Team USA off more so than the U18s. At least I do in the power rankings. But with the complement of the U18s as well throughout the regular season, it'll taper off towards the end. The U17s have proven that they're good enough to not only compete but to win a lot of games in this league. So I've got them at number 4. And now it's up to the 3 juggernauts who we knew would be the top 3, but in what order?
Well, I'm going to... Again, this year we're splitting hairs on these last 3, I believe. I think all 3 of them are really solid, and but I'm gonna start at number 3 with Waterloo, just because they've really been struggling recently. 7-3 in their last 10. That's a terrible struggle for the Waterloo Blackhawks. I'm joking, people over there in the Cedar Valley. They're not really 7-3. Anybody will take that. That's a remarkable run to go on. But for the Blackhawks, that's a little bit below their standard. But again, that's a team. A .750 winning percentage going into the holidays is remarkable. And the thing for me, they're running away with the Western Conference. I think they're about 10 points clear of second place not too long ago, and that's really, really hard to do in the Western Conference. So I like them at number 3 just because they've been off just a little bit of a tick the last couple weekends. But again, that's a team that's going to win the Western Conference, going to be number 1 seed in the West, and they're going to be tough to beat.
They've got a great goaltending. Maybe the goalie of the year in Logan Stein. The only knock you could have against him is he's split time with Gabriel Carrier, but still he's put up tremendous numbers. Already has 4 shutouts, which is just incredible. He's at the World Junior A Challenge right now. Waterloo's still another good weekend, but yeah, they're not as hot as they were. I have them at 3, but they will win the Western Conference. There's not much doubt in my mind that that's going to happen. A very deep team and the second best defensive team in the league behind Dubuque. So, moment of truth. You snubbed Dubuque last time from number 1 in your power rankings. We both did, though, to be fair. Did you snub them again?
I did.
You did?
I did. I did. I just and this isn't any snub on Dubuque. I just think Chicago has had more style points. They've scored 106 goals. They're putting up a ton of goals every game, and their defense is not shabby. They've scored 106, but they've allowed 68. I just think they're putting up style points right now. We should be talking about Dubuque because Dubuque is the team that I have at number 2, but Dubuque has the best defense in the USHL by far. Allowed only 41 goals through the first 20 games, and that's just a shade over 2 goals a game. You're going to win a lot of hockey games when you do that. I love the way that the Fighting Saints have been finding ways to win. A lot of different ways to win. You're scoring, coming from behind, scoring on the power play. Scoring in overtime. There are a lot of different adversities that the Saints have had to face to get to this point where they have the record that they have. So, it's a great thing for the Fighting Saints to win these hockey games. I just think Chicago is just a tick above them, and again, we're splitting hairs on these 2 teams especially. I think Waterloo is, for my money, is a clear number 3 right now. But I think it's just a matter of flipping a coin on these 2 teams on who you like better, Dubuque or Chicago. Yeah,
I flip-flopped them. I have Dubuque at 1. I have Chicago at 2. Chicago's incredible. This offense is, if they're able to maintain it, and it seems with the depth that they have that they might be able to do it for all 62 games, they're going to go down as one of the best offenses in USHL history, the way they're producing, not just with the depth, but with how many goals they're scoring. The reason I have Dubuque at 1 is because defense over offense when the games really count in crunch time. And I know we're a long way away from that, but both of these teams seem to be on a clear-cut collision course for maybe the Eastern Conference Finals. They just seem to separate themselves so much from everyone else in the Eastern Conference already, and that's even saying Team USA. I still think, even though Dubuque lost to Team USA, I still think they're a lot better than Team USA, but defense trumps offense in those tight games, and also finding different ways to win. Chicago's not a one-trick pony, but they try to beat you into submission with offense. Dubuque has shown that they can beat you into submission with their offense. They did it 7-1 on the road against Waterloo. They can beat you 1-0 like they did against Sioux City, and they won every way in between. So I just think their ability to win games in different ways, but to possess that offense. And give me Eric Portillo over any goalie right now in the USHL. Even though Stein's numbers are better, Portillo is the workhorse that you want in the playoffs. So, like you said, if it's a flip of the coin, but Dubuque's my number one because of the defense. I value it a little higher than offense.
I think what the moment of truth is going to be when we get into mid to late February, because it seems like every year that's about the time when that defensive mindset really takes over. The first half is always about, run and gun, putting up a lot of points, putting up a lot of goals. And then when you get into February, mid-February, late February, that's when defensive structure throughout the entire league, that's when it really starts to take hold, and that's when it becomes a lot harder to score goals. That's when you have to start scoring the ugly goals. And it'll be interesting to see, like you said, if Chicago can maintain this offensive consistency when we get to that point where defense really starts to shine. But just at this point in the season, again, I just think Chicago's had a few more style points and done a little bit better. Dubuque again has the highest winning percentage in the entire league at .825. Chicago is second in that. So I mean they're just a few clicks behind Dubuque, but again I think we're just splitting hairs. Yep. And again, you could flip a coin. I could make a very easy case that Dubuque should be number one, and I'm sure you can make a very good case that Chicago could be number one. But just at this point in time, I just think Chicago has been a little bit more impressive in how they've gotten to this point.
Yeah, Chicago, like you said, it was a pretty clear-cut 1 and 2. I don't think there was any consideration in my mind of Waterloo being up in the top 3. I know we both had Waterloo at number 1 last time, so they have dropped off a little bit. But yeah, Dubuque and Chicago, it's a shame we have to wait so long to see those two teams play. But when we do, it should be a great game. I don't see many blemishes on the record for them up until that point. So unfortunately, it's all the time we have to talk these USHL power rankings. We won't have a show next week as it's the Monday before Christmas. So a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all the listeners out there. And we'll get you an updated schedule for the Fighting Saints report as soon as we can. We should be back the Monday after that, but maybe not after that. I don't know. Lots of holidays going on. Who knows what's going to happen? We'll be talking hockey, though. And as always, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and thanks for tuning in.